Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Davis. Pleased to be joined by the young prodigy, lifetime Longhorn CJ Vogel, and the man who needs no introduction, the newest member of the On Texas Football family, my friend. And once again, happy and proud to call him a co-worker. It's my man Jeff Howe joining us for our Wednesday night live stream. We got a lot to get into on the show, guys. We got there's a Bucky Brooks top 5 at every position listing that he has out for NFL Network. I want to get into that a little bit because there's some Longhorns that have been showing some love. There are end of season grades for NFL from Pro Football Focus, but I want to get to the rookies, the Longhorn rookies. Ask you guys kind of how you think those guys performed in their rookie campaigns. We'll get into that coming up a little bit later on. There's also, I think, an interesting conversation we have to have about the upcoming season, at least the start to the upcoming season for the Longhorn football team. They will play Ohio State. Ohio State's had a lot of turnover because coming off of that national championship season, everybody's cashing in. So they had to hire some new guys, hiring a new defensive coordinator. A familiar name, Matt Patricia, is expected to be hired as the new defensive coordinator for Ohio State. So we'll talk a little bit about Matt Patricia and his scheme. We'll be talking a lot about that, of course, as the Longhorns get ready for the 2025 season, but we'll get into that too coming up a little bit later on in the show. Also, I want to get into this. There's a conversation happening all around the country about spring football. We've talked about it. There have been several reports that even Sark is considering maybe open to changing the spring format a little bit. And we've talked about Matt Rule's comment. Well, CBS Sports, that was an article with several coaches who are being quoted as also they're also along the same lines. It seems like they're in agreement with maybe Matt Rule and Coach Sark, maybe not for the same reasons, but it seems like everybody may be reconsidering what the old spring football format was and maybe wanting to do something new. So we'll talk about that too coming up. All right. Also, you guys know how it works. Super Chat jump to the front of the line. You can interrupt the show at any time. You can drive the show in any direction you want to, so get it in while you can. We'll be here for almost an hour today. All right, so let's start here, gentlemen. I got a question to start off things. So Pro Football Focus have their end of season grades for all the NFL players, but rookies specifically. So it's got a simple question: what Longhorn player do you think had the highest Pro Football Focus grade of all the rookies in their rookie campaign this past season?
Ooh. I guess Jordan Whittington.
That's a good guess.
I'm gonna go Tavondre Sweat. I don't know if that's just because the Titans ended up on my TV or I actually paid attention to Red Zone when the Titans were on, but yeah, I'm gonna guess T Sweat.
Man, y'all are both real good. I mean, y'all watch ball. Y'all know some ball because Jay Witt, and a lot of people wouldn't have guessed it. He had the highest overall Pro Football Focus grade of all the rookies.
Wow,
out of Texas. He had a 78.3. It was fourth out of all the apparently rookie receivers because they got him 4 out of the 20 that they have here. They got to actually where they rank among their peers. And Tavondre Sweat second, Jeff. So you're right there on the money. He had a 76.2 overall Pro Football Focus grade, and that was apparently the best Pro Football Focus grade from the rookie D tackles. Oh no, Tavondre Sweat's a star. Yeah, I'm a Texans fan. So I watch a lot of AFC South and Tavondre Sweat. I'm telling you, Tennessee Titans, that dude's a star. I'll give you the numbers in a second, but both you guys are right. So you first, CJ, why'd you throw Jay Witt out there? He had a great season, but hell, X-Man, by the way, here, just so you know, 72.4. So he's not that far. And by the way, they had graded him on his playoffs. He had one of the best playoff campaigns of any receiver in the league, actually. His playoffs were fantastic. But what are your thoughts? Jay Witt being the highest graded. You knew it. So how'd you know?
Well, I'll start with this. When I was in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, I actually talked very briefly with someone from the Titans front office. And, I asked him, I said, how's Tavondre Sweat coming along? And he looked at me and he stopped whatever he was doing. And he goes, the fans love this guy. And it's not going to take long. He goes, it won't take too long before the rest of the league starts to like this guy as well. And this, of course, was right after he had the fumble recovery or the stiff arm and 20, 30-yard return, whatnot. So that's great to hear for Tavondre Sweat. But no, I just picked Jordan Whittington because, look, this is a guy that you could tell go run through a tree and he'd put his helmet on and say, how hard? Where do you want me to hit it? And that's exactly what the Rams ask him to do. He does a lot of that, kind of stall motion over the offensive line. He cracks a lot of guys. They use him often to create running lanes for Kyron Williams. And it's, not necessarily a tight end's role, but it's as close as you could get to a tight end kind of fullback role out of that wide receiver position, where he more times than not will come in motion and stop kind of right between a tight end or a tackle right in the middle, like forming a little triangle between the three, or he's coming all the way across and sitting between a tackle and a guard just to kick out the play side linebacker. So they love what he does physically in that Rams defense, and not many NFL wide receivers can do that level of physicality off. But he does a whole lot for them. And having watched a few Rams games this year, I mean, their broadcast loves him as well. So that was my guess there. I'm glad, PFF recognized it as well.
Yeah. No, no, I'm with you. I did not expect that. I'm really happy for him. He ended up being in a perfect spot because they drafted him. A lot of what they drafted on were the intangibles from Jordan Whittington, because they like the character, the player, the football character of the young man. Turns out they got a diamond in the rough, stayed healthy. And when Jay Witt stays healthy, I think we all have recognized that guy was an NFL player when he got on campus. If he ever stayed healthy, durability was his big issue. But now that he's gotten past that, man, Jay Witt looks like he's going to have a sound start to his NFL career. Your thoughts, Jeff, about not only Jay Witt, but T'Vondre Sweat, the two best rookie campaigns, if you ask Pro Football Focus, based on their scores for the Longhorns.
First off, you watching so much AFC South, Rod, that's you doing the Lord's work right there. So that somebody doesn't have to, because you're doing it. So bless you for that. Now, it just seemed like every time that I watched the Titans, he was doing something, we saw it at Texas. Sometimes Sweat's deal is, hey, he could just be a disruptor. It's just, reestablishing the line of scrimmage, moving the pocket, doing those kinds of things that can let other people get work around him. But, the big thing with T'Vondre was, okay, how serious is he going to take this? Like, is he really going to be a pro? And honestly, I was worried about, him going to the Titans, because I'm like, man, I know when he and Keandre Coburn were together at Texas, it was like laugh factory in that defensive tackle room with both those guys there. So it could be out of hand at times. But the fact that he found a home, and like you said, CJ, the fans do love him. He seems to be a fan favorite with the Titans already. And again, a guy that just, you feel his presence constantly. So as long as he's locked in and motivated, then he can. You can say this, but very rarely do you really mean it. I think he can be as good as he wants to be. If he decides he wants to just lock in and be focused on football, eat, breathe, sleep football, and take it seriously from the time he leaves the parking lot until the time he walks out of the building every day, then he's going to be a Pro Bowl caliber guy for a long time.
Yep. Freakish agility for a guy that size. Here are my T'Vondre Sweat stats to that. He played based the second most snaps for a rookie D lineman.
It's insane.
Remember, the question was, could he be an every down D lineman? Does he have the conditioning? Is he too damn big to do that? Nope, not at all. Dude was a run stuffing presence on early downs and was a pass rushing beast on later downs and passing downs. And this is the T'Vondre Sweat stat that may end up being a nice nugget on some trivia or something, Longhorn, maybe some NFL trivia later on. His 30-yard fumble return was the longest for a 330-pound player, 330 pounds or more player, 330 pounds or heavier player since at least 2000. So, big boys don't return fumbles like that. It looks so agile. By the way, Sean Rogers, he's fourth on here, by the way.
Wow.
Sean Rogers had a 21-yard fumble return.
Where's Keith Traylor on that list, Rod?
In the last, was that in the last? That's 25 years or so since 2000. That's all I got.
Keith Traylor's not on there. Okay,
I don't see him on here. I see Albert Hainsworth is on here. He had they don't go very low. He had a 12-yard one. He made it in the top 10.
See, I see a lot of parallels, honestly, between Sweat and Hainsworth, because Albert Hainsworth, Rod, you were in the league the same time he was. He was one of those guys that I mean, if he could have just gotten out of his own way, he'd probably be in the Hall of Fame right now. I mean, he was that talented. He just couldn't get out of his own way. And it's not like he was doing bad things. It was just boneheaded stuff, just knuckleheaded stuff, immaturity. Look, if T Sweat's got the maturity thing down, then the Titans got themselves a steal. I mean, they got a guy that probably, at the end of the day, guys, he probably had top 20 value. Was a player good enough to go in the top 20?
Agreed.
They got him early in the second round. I mean, so they got first round value in the second round with Sweat.
No, he'll have a monster mega contract, the second one, because D tackle is a premium position now, especially if you can rush the passer and stuff to run and do both. He can do both. His second contract's going to be a beast. It's going to be a monster.
That's when I would be concerned about him.
Oh, maybe
when he gets that contract.
Maybe
Albert Hainsworth. And Albert Hainsworth probably should have never gotten the $100 million deal or whatever he got. But that's my thing with Sweat. But
as long as he stops stomping on heads, right?
Yeah, exactly. But I'm happy for Tavondre because I love that eval when Texas made it. And Rod, you talk about the freakish athleticism. It's very rare that you see a big guy that as their bodies, as they start to fill out, they don't lose any of the athleticism. I mean, Tavondre is just as athletic now as he was as a junior in high school running up and down the basketball court. So it's weird how he's gone from like in the 250s, 260s when he committed to Texas way back when to now he's in the 330s, 340s and hasn't lost any of that athleticism.
Can I get y'all's thoughts? We're seeing some comments now on Adonai Mitchell and his rookie campaign. I know he didn't have some of those big-time numbers, some games didn't have a whole lot of help and accuracy from the quarterback position. But what did y'all think about A.D. Mitchell in year one? I ask this because I think he's one of those guys where you'll know the meme where it's the guy sitting on the bus and he looks out the left side and he says, oh, the analytical guys, result in this. The left side is all bright and looking sunny. And on the right side of the bus, he's looking at the side of the canyon. It's all dark and gloomy. And it's, they take away two different takes on the same player. But for Adonai Mitchell, it's dark and gloomy when you look at the box score, right? But then I think you look at some of these analytical, separation numbers, routes against man coverage. There are all sorts of numbers that say he actually had a pretty good year and is set up to have a pretty solid, rookie contract with the Colts. He just couldn't get the ball, right? And for whatever the reason, Anthony Richardson or Joe Flacco or whoever's back for the Colts, they just couldn't ever find the same page consistently. But I'm hoping, that's the next step for an Anthony Richardson, because there were some moments I thought where the routes ran certainly indicated what we all thought, and that was a guy at 6'2.5" running 4.35 that was a mismatch nightmare waiting to happen, essentially.
Yep, and he could consistently beat man-to-man coverage because I saw those scores too. If you're looking like separation scores, and I think you call it average separation score. Like I'm not trying to be like it's an ass rating. And he had one of the highest ass ratings. I know, but he did. His ass score was through the roof early on. It really was, like probably through the first 6 weeks to 2 months of the season. He had one of the highest ass ratings in the NFL.
He probably only had 8 catches.
They just couldn't get on the same page, man. They just couldn't work it out, whatever. But he was separating. He was getting separation. That's no doubt.
I think there was like a 3-minute long highlight montage that was just like misses towards Adonai Mitchell's direction. And it's like, okay, if you did the math on all of these and, really if you only hit 50 or 60% of these throws in which he was open, he's looking at an 800, 900-yard receiving season with multiple touchdowns. And I know Colts fans wanted to see more, but hey, I think it starts with the quarterback more than anything. So I'm excited to see where he continues to grow in his role there with the Colts.
I mean, Anthony Richardson completed under 50% of his passes last year. Under 50. Like that he's a case study, Rod. We talk about it all the time, man. Nobody knows what they're doing at quarterback. Every now and then, I think it's more blind squirrels finding nuts than anything when we talk about people drafting quarterbacks, because they're going to constantly be overdrafted and taken for the wrong reason. But no, with A.D. Mitchell, to back up what CJ just said, it seemed like every time I watched the Colts or saw the Colts on offense, it seemed like he had a ball getting thrown over his head or 6 yards out. I mean, dude, he'd had to been like Gumby or Stretch Armstrong to catch radius to catch some of those balls that were thrown his way. I maintain, and I am an unapologetic Sam Ellinger apologist, that they'd have just let Sam cook, things might have been different for AD and the Colts. I'm just saying. They'd let him cook, but didn't happen. So you reap what you sow, Colts. I will say this, though, man. I feel good about the Colts taking a Texas guy again in this draft, Rod, because Chris Ballard being a Texas City guy, he seems to have gotten an affinity for Texas guys of late. So
that's true. That's a good point, though. Yeah, and he was a big advocate of A.D. Mitchell. Remember, all some of those reports came out prior to the draft, some of that stuff like that.
Yeah, the press conference rant.
He went off. He went on a rant about how A.D. Mitchell and how he vetted him, and he's got good football character, and that they believe in him, that kind of stuff. So I think he's in a good spot. But you're right. I don't know about AR, man. I'm not really a fan of him as a quarterback. I think he's a hell of an athlete, but not
47.7%, Rod.
In the NFL. And Mike Leach tried to tell y'all, even the late great Mike Leach is like, you can't make a big arm quarterback, an inaccurate big arm quarterback accurate. You can't do it. It's very rare. Now, Josh Allen is probably one of the exceptions to the rule. He's one of the exceptions. Most quarterbacks, you can't do that. Jalen Hurts did get more accurate too over time. He also, I think, is kind of one of those exceptions, maybe an outlier, because he's gotten that more accurate throughout his career. But it helps to have 2 elite wide receivers at your disposal as well.
Like my head exploded in the preseason when it's the NFL fans that don't watch college football that watch the Patriots preseason game. Like, oh my God, how did Joe Milton last so long in the draft? I'm like, because y'all are seeing just Joe Milton crank back and throw the football. Y'all haven't had to watch Joe Milton play quarterback, which he can't.
Yeah.
College. I don't know why you think he could suddenly do it in the NFL. So
yeah. No, I remember Mike Lee said, I'd rather take a shortstop and turn him into a quarterback rather than take some inaccurate big arm quarterback and try to make him accurate. Yeah. Speaking of the NFL, you just talking about the Patriots. The Ohio State Buckeyes, gentlemen, they made a hire for the defensive coordinator position. Looks like it's going to be a name that we're all familiar with. Speaking of NFL ties, Matt Patricia is going to be the new defensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes. I mean, I got to tell you, I think it's a good hire for them. I don't necessarily know how well his system will adapt to the college scheme, or if he needs to adapt it to the college scheme. But I don't think it's a bad hire. A lot of Ohio State fans are criticizing this hire. I don't think they all like it, from what I've gathered so far.
It's going to be interesting, right? His whole thing in the NFL was basically the Patriot way. Like, you're on time, you're disciplined, you're in and out of the facility, here to work. Should that work in the college level? Absolutely. But, what can you bring from that NFL background to Ohio State that can be implemented to a room of 100, 18 to 22-year-olds? I think that's going to be interesting. How quickly can you get guys who weren't recruited by you to buy into the system? Because, again, he's a hardhead, right? He's one of those guys, don't let that pencil in the back of the cap fool you. This guy's here to coach your ass and be pretty strict while doing so. So I'm interested to see how this kind of plays out. At the end of the day, he is a really smart football coach, but I think this is something that you will continue to see with Ryan Day, is finding someone on either side of the ball that he can just point to and say, this is you, take over and don't let me down, essentially. And this is, if you look at Jim Knowles, if you look at Chip Kelly, Matt Patricia very much follows that same pedigree so far.
Yeah. You know what, Rod? I've always wondered this. Because the Belichick assistants, for the most part, haven't cut the mustard in the NFL. But we saw it with Bill O'Brien when he was at Penn State and even now at Boston College. And I'm wondering if Matt Patricia is just kind of using this as a stepping stone just to get his feet wet in college football and then become a head coach. And like Josh McDaniels is a guy that's he strikes me more as like Josh McDaniels would be a better college coach than a pro coach where you have a little bit more control over the players. I don't know. Part of me thinks the Belichick guys are better suited for the college game than the pro game.
Wow, interesting. Well, said work that way for Nick Saban. I like that. That's a nice take. That's a radical take. you might have the evidence to back that up, honestly. And that's it. You wouldn't think that,
right?
But maybe now, and we'll see, because Belichick himself is now in college. So we'll
yeah.
But no, it's an interesting take though. I never thought about it that way.
I look back to the quote Darius Slay had whenever he was getting the boot out of Detroit. He was like, "Look, for Patricia, it's my way or the highway, and I'm on the highway right now." That's Matthew behind the scenes probably fist pumping, saying thank you to Matt Patricia, sending him postcards and flowers for allowing Slay to go win a Super Bowl with the Eagles this year. But if that works in the year of the portal, the era of the portal, I'd be a little bit surprised even at Ohio State. That's something I think you have to show a little bend. You have to buy into the culture that is established by Ryan Day or whoever is the head coach. When you get to that point, year 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it might be, and you feel like, all right, now I can show around like I am, it's my way. Sure, that might work then. Will he be there at Ohio State for that long? I feel like, to y'all's point, this might be one of those things where he just kind of, in between job to get to a bigger job or back to the league. We'll see, though.
Yeah. The thing with him, though, to me, it's not even schematic, because at the end of the day, I'm going to kind of counter what I just said a little bit. Especially at the college level, you got to be a great teacher of the game to relay the information and get guys to understand it. And has he humbled himself? Because the Belichick guys don't have a great track record of learning from their mistakes. I mean, whether you're talking about McDaniels or Matt Patricia, based on the Detroit stuff that's come out, even Charlie Weiss, pretty much like Romeo Crennel's kind of been the exception to the rule. The Belichick guys tend to just ooze arrogance, and they are the smartest guy in the room, and nobody can tell them different. If Matt Patricia's humbled himself a little bit, then this could end up working out, because when it comes to schematics, X's and O's, I have no doubt he's good enough to do it. It's just, can he be relatable and teach it to, a Caleb Downs and the guys that are at the forefront of that defense?
Yeah, and I almost wonder, is he just going to bring in his system, or are they going to adopt some of the principles under what Jim Knowles has been doing to try to, transition those guys slowly to his system, or are they going to go, that kind of cold turkey and just starting? And that can be tough. Like, that means you can struggle early on in the season. If you're just cutting cold turkey and going to a new system, that would be good for Texas. Usually they don't, with a new system, they don't round into form until, midway through the year, later on in the season. So that could be a good sign for Texas, depending on how they want to transition and transition that unit. So, but they still got studs, and I think it's a good hire, Matt Patricia. I like the hire. Don't necessarily know how he's going to work out on the recruiting trail, but to your point, I don't know if he's going to be there that long for it to matter necessarily in the recruiting game. I think he might be somebody just trying to reinvent himself here at Ohio State potentially, and then move on back up to the league.
Rod, you have a take one way or the other on which is better, because I know, like, Nick Saban with offensive coordinators, it kind of started with Lane Kiffin, whether it was Brian Daboll or Mike Locksley or Sark or even Bill O'Brien, Tommy Rees, all the way through the end. All those guys talk about, hey, this is Alabama's offense, I'm just going to kind of add my tweaks to it. Or do you like that model? Or would you rather a guy come in and do his own thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting, right? Because I think it depends on the credibility of the person you're bringing in, their resume, right? You're bringing in somebody who's been known to have their own system, and it's been a system that's been tested and also has achieved, great things at that level of play. I think you can trust them coming in to integrate the systems is what I would ideally like to do. I would like to integrate. If my guys have been in the system and recruited to a system for 3 years, 2 years, and I'm bringing in somebody new, I would ideally like them to integrate the systems. But if I'm going to bring in, I think I would like a guy who is kind of a system coach, like Sark has his system. I know Nick Saban had guys running their system, but Sark ran his system. Sark, because Sark has a system, right? So I think I would like to bring in a coach who probably has their own kind of tried and true philosophy, their signature card, whatever it is, right? Their signature system. I think I like that. But if I was a coach, I'd be like, I want you to integrate it though. I'd like you to integrate with some of the things that we already do well, that are staples already with our guys. And I think good coach can do it. Jim Knowles did that when he first got to Ohio State. They didn't go straight to the 4.25 and the 3 high again. Did it? It was a slower process, and I think that usually works out a little bit better sometimes than just going cold turkey. And I think some guys struggle with that. A lot of your better players may struggle with that. So
I got you. That makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Let's. And real quick, I want to get to Bucky Brooks's top 5. I'll get to that in a second, and get to you guys' questions as well. But first, let's thank one of our sponsors. I think our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. Before we move on here, Flat Creek Estate Winery, folks, is just minutes from downtown Austin, and they've won award after award for their vintage wine, Super Texan. Super Texan, actually, right now, folks, is available at your local Specs. They also have a fantastic display. I saw it at your local Central Market there as well. So I'm glad the good word is getting out about our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. And not only do they produce some of the best premium wines on the market right now, including Super Texan, but also love the fantastic rosé that they have, very refreshing. The Pinot Grigio is really good as well. But it's a gorgeous venue for different occasions, no matter what the occasion is. Trust me, Flat Creek Estate Winery has a gorgeous venue that will fit the occasion. Barbecues and wine tastings every single weekend. It's perfect for a day date with your significant other or a weekend getaway with your significant other. That's Flat Creek Estate Winery, flatcreekestate.com. Thank you very much for supporting and sponsoring our Wednesday night live stream. We appreciate it. All right, let's get to a couple of questions here, then we'll get back to a couple of topics. I want to talk about Bucky Brooks having his top 5 ranked players coming out in the draft at every position. And, of course, a lot of Longhorns getting some love there. How about this one from Todd? Any news on whether or not –
Well, cliffhanger there.
Sorry about that. Any news on whether it would be spring game or just practice? Thank you, Todd, for the question. What do you guys think? I mean, we still have not necessarily heard any confirmation one way or the other about the spring game or now the spring practice schedule at all.
Yeah, we haven't. I'm not sure when or if we will officially. It's interesting. I was on the road this week through a couple schools down here, and I was like, it doesn't sound like Texas will be having their spring game. And this coach told me we've had plenty of college coaches come through here in the last month or two. We've talked about it. I've heard about it. I'm not sure why it's starting to get traction. And we kind of went through it kind of play by play. Hey, some teams just went through 16 games. Some just played 14. Others are turning around, having their spring ball start up at the end of the month. And I'm sitting there, thinking to myself, how? Because the high school season will play from the start of August, the middle of August, all the way to the first week of December. And then they're done. And then they don't pick up spring football until really the first week of April, and they run it basically that full month of April all the way to the first or second week of May. So it's a whole month and a half further along into the calendar year than the college game is. And so whenever I was asking, I was like, is that just by design? Because, well, we got to juggle baseball, right? We got to juggle track. We got to make sure that we get all of our kids back that we want to get those extra reps in for football. But on top of that, it's tough to sit there and ask a kid who just played 13 games in high school to go run track, to go work out, and then to put the pads back on for 15 more practices. And that makes 100% sense, but I'm sitting there thinking, if that's the case, why are some of these schools even trying to start this back up in, the last week of February? I think Clemson's one of those schools that's starting, spring practice up while everybody's at the combine. So it's interesting there. I think it's up to the coaches, obviously. I would not be surprised if you didn't see any spring at all for Texas, right? Just throw the pads on. They'll go out to Dennis. They'll be in the bubble. They'll do their thing, but it won't be publicized at all again. And this goes back to the rule debate as well. Do you want your second and third stringers marketed? And I think that's a interesting debate. To me, it doesn't have as much effect, but really when you talk about how lengthy these seasons are and how quick of a turnaround it is for these guys who just moved onto campus or otherwise I've been going through conditioning once again, I think you got to look at saving these legs as much as you can.
For me, it goes back. I've tried to look at this from a number of different angles, from the coach's perspective, the player's perspective, the fans' perspective. from an athletic department perspective, because hey, you're looking to generate revenue any way you can, and people will come into town for a spring game. I tend to lean towards the siding with the coaches, but not for the reasons Sark mentioned. Just in regards to the spring game, if I've got an opportunity to put the pads on and have a full contact day, I don't want to waste it where some of your spring games going to be thud anyway. You don't want to show much. In other words, I want my full contact sessions in spring ball to matter. I want to get the most out of them that I can because I don't have that many. So I think whatever you do for the spring game, I honestly think you save one of those walkthrough practices, or like just not even a shells practice, Rod, just maybe like a helmets only deal, and just kind of wrap up the spring and do some 7-on-7 for the fans or whatever. I know it's not what the fans want, but if I'm Sark, I've got to maximize my opportunities when I get on the field. And if it's going to be somewhat of a wasted day, which a spring game kind of is, then I don't want to waste it on something important. What I think eventually is going to have to happen, fellas, and I think this is more along down the road when we start talking about power conference autonomy for football. What I would like to see is in July, like between that July 4th break and the start of August, you have those acclimation practices. I would rather see the acclimation practices go to like basically a mini camp where you have a week in t-shirts and shorts. You can do the install, basically run through everything right there. So that way you get the players a little bit of a break, finish up summer school or whatever, then come back with your 20 some odd practices before the opener. And then you can just hit the ground running in camp day one. So I think, but that's down the road. I don't know, Rod. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but that's just where I'm at. I don't want, if I'm Sark or any coach, I just don't want to waste days. And that's kind of the only balance I can see between not wasting a day and giving the fans something.
Yep. No, that's a good point. There's a story over at CBS Sports that says what they're reporting that FBS coaches, they discussed a potential proposal to eliminate spring practices and implement OTAs the late spring and early summer months at the American Football Coaches Association annual meeting in January. They said they opted not to discuss the topic at length in more detail, but they think next time they meet up, they probably will discuss that down the line, especially after revenue sharing and, House. They obviously the different changes that we're seeing now in the structure of major college sports. So I think ultimately, Matt Rule brings it up for a different reason. He's worried about tampering. There's an SEC coach who was quoted in here anonymously who said, quote, "No spring game. I give zero blanks about tampering, but I care more about not getting players injured." I mean, that sounds like Sark, honestly. But and I think Sark is kind of closer to that coach's thought that, listen, I don't care about all, I just don't want to get players injured. Your point, Jeff, what about the fans? What about that little sneak peek the fans get because they look forward to it? You do have to find something, I think, to satisfy obviously that to quench that thirst that fans have in that off season. And I think every institution is going to deal with that in a little bit differently. But ultimately, guys, I hate to say it, Black Stradama's best prediction: spring games are going away.
Yeah,
you don't have enough people advocating for them. There's not enough money in them. And you're about to, the money now in major college sports, guys, about to go to a whole nother level now, revenue sharing. By the way, they just, the new White House, basically, they've decided Title IX does not apply to revenue sharing.
Interesting.
It does not apply to revenue sharing. So they do not have to equally distribute revenue proportionally based on the House settlement. They ain't got to do that at all, based on revenue sharing. So it's about to go to a whole nother level. So I don't think spring game, it's more of a burden than a benefit at this point. It's like the penny. The penny costs, a penny costs a nickel to make. Like, I'm not joking. The penny costs like 4 cents to make. Why the hell are we still making pennies? Does anybody know why we're still making pennies? And I think at one point, spring football is going, at least some coaches going to look at it like the penny. It's costing me way too much, and I'm not getting enough in return.
Yeah, a counter I would add to spring ball is you have to have something that resembles your team in action for recruiting. Otherwise, the last time that these recruits will see you on the field is your loss, your last game of the season. If you make the playoff, you won't see them again for 9 months, right? You can watch a workout, but you won't get an understanding of what these guys look like without a ball, and maybe some tunes to see how the coaches actually get out there and coach these kids up. Is that replaceable? Sure. I mean, you could find different ways to get your coaches in action. I'm sure, whether it be just pads, shorts, whatever. But point being, with as recruiting's been moved up as much as it has been, with most decisions coming June, July, August, getting it out of the way for the senior season, it's a long time to go without seeing what your coach might actually look like. If that was the case, Jamie French would have had no clue what Texas looked like on the field with Chris Jackson, with Steve Sarkeesian and the quarterbacks throwing the ball, right? Some of these other guys, you just don't know what it might look like. Josiah Sharma's first visit was in spring. It's tough because you bring these guys in, and Sharma's a great example actually, because he came in on a random Tuesday for a spring practice in which he came in. He was one of 3 guys on campus. He got to sit there with Kenny Baker, talk to Sarkeesian, and basically got a one-on-one trip, almost an unofficial by himself and his head coaches from Folsom, just to see what it was like. So if you take that away, you got to find something that resonates with recruits in the same way. If there's ever a guy or a group of commits that you don't already have some sort of pre-existing relationship or contact with.
Good point there.
Only thing, Rod, that I think could save it for the fans out there that are bummed about it, the only thing that could change it is if Fox and ESPN decide, nope, we've got to have that. We got to have spring games
Content.
We got to have the content. But at the end of the day, I don't think spring game. Did anybody other than sickos like us? Does anybody really go back and watch the spring game? Like
I watched it 3 times.
Again, other than sickos like us, you know what I'm saying? Like, so I just don't. I think even for TV, it's almost like TV has bigger fish to fry.
Nah, you're right. No, like I said, I don't know. I think every school's going to deal with it differently, but I feel like there's a movement for it to go away right now. I just feel like that. CBS, by the way, they polled 18 FBS coaches on whether they would conduct spring scrimmages this offseason, and 10 said they would, but several said they would hesitate if it was televised, because they're paranoid about, I guess, tampering and that kind of stuff. So, yeah. All right. Good conversation there. Thank you for the question. Appreciate it. How about this one from Jose? I think it means Jeff, but he says Jefe. So
Jose, yeah, Jose's good. Jose's good. It's Jefe.
Hey, no, we got. Does Jefe mean boss? Hey,
yeah,
that's a cool name.
Jose's good people. I speak Jose, so we're good.
Okay. Does Texas have the best staff in the SEC, no matter who they get at the cornerback coach? Thoughts, Jeff?
That's interesting. Adding Alabama adding Ryan Grubb is interesting just because of the dynamic between he and Kalen DeBoer. And I tend to think Kane Womack is a good DC. Look, as long as he's still in the building. As long as he's still in the building in Athens, Georgia, if Will Muschamp's a part of your staff, I'm going to give you an edge there. But, yeah, I mean, the Texas staff doesn't take a back seat to anybody. I mean, I remember this was going into Sark's first year, and I had people that had followed this program long before I roamed this mortal world tell me that, hey, they're like, this is the best staff a Texas coach has put together since Fred Akers. They're like Coach Akers' staff was the last staff that was this good.
Wow.
And even with the turnover we've seen since then, that was Tashard Choice wasn't a part of the staff yet. Johnny Nansen, Kenny Baker, the additions, Chris Jackson that we've seen lately. So yeah, I mean and Rod, you were a part during your time at Texas and those years after you, there were some really good coaching staffs there, but we'll see what happens with the replacement for Blake Gideon, but I can't think of one, at least that I've seen at Texas, that I can definitely say was head and shoulders better than this one.
I agree with you. No, I'm with you. Sark's done great. Like, there's no reason for we're not stressing about. Nobody's stressing about who he's going to hire a DB coach. Like, no, there's nobody stressing. Like, man, he better get this right. If you don't get this hire right, like we're like, nah, whoever Sark hires, even if they're off the beaten path and somebody that we haven't really researched or mentioned, I think we trust Sark at this point, and then we'll go vet the hire after that. But he's earned the trust at this point. He's done a great job building the staff. And and keeping the staff. And when guys leave, they leave for jobs that, obviously giving them promotions toward them achieving something bigger. So I think Sark has done a great job. You're right about that. Good question there, Jose.
How I felt about Mac making hires in the 2000s, right up until that Larry McDuff fiasco. But then he went and redeemed himself and hired Will Muschamp the next offseason. So the one error Mac made during that run, he definitely made up for it.
The only hire I criticized from Sark was keeping Andre Coleman, and I think I was right about that one.
Yeah,
and he that was his Larry McDuff, and he rectified that after. I've dumped on Larry McDuff. I haven't dumped on Larry McDuff as much as I've dumped on Sean Watson. By the way, for anybody that doesn't know, if you haven't listened to Rod and I in our Blitz days, like I worship at the feet of Will Muschamp. If there was a football church, I'd want Will Muschamp to be the preacher. So there will be, as long as I'm part of the OTF family, there will be no Will Muschamp slander on this channel.
Yep. No, I win. That was our unofficial mascot, I believe, of the Blitz.
He's my spirit animal. He's my football spirit animal.
It was. Todd wants to know any new news on possible Texas DB coach hires. We're just talking about Sark building his staff. CJ, any new news? I mean, we've talked about anything new though that we haven't.
No, not entirely new. A name that's been thrown to me a couple times is Mark Orphy out of Rutgers. Just as someone to monitor. Originally from North Shore High School, so there's some Houston ties there. Maybe it'll help Texas get some more success out of North Shore. But no, nothing concrete there. I'm not sure really if this is a guy that they're going to heavily pursue, just more some fodder behind the scenes. Some extra fodder that I'll add to this is it's not a foregone conclusion, and we've talked about Terry Joseph, but it's not crazy to say that he just takes over a pass game coordinator or moves the safeties and Texas brings in additional cornerbacks coach. That would be the case if that was the move for Terry Joseph. So right now, just kind of in a waiting pattern as Sarkeesian and that rest of that defensive staff go through some of the interviewees and some of the guys that they're trying to vet before this job finds its next home.
Yeah, I can't wait to see what direction he goes in, because I'm with you, CJ. I do kind of feel like he's shuffling some things around in secondary, and it seems like a lot of names I'm hearing are guys with cornerback backgrounds specifically. So maybe Terry Joseph is maybe moving around to be the PGC safeties coach. And I still think I like what Bobby said about them really benefiting from Coach Hazelton working individually with the nickels. And he believes they want to bring in potentially 3 and like have a nickels coach as well. And obviously, every different pay structure, and their one guy would obviously call the shots there. And maybe that would be Terry Joseph the way things are looking now. But it looks like Sark is kind of building this thing, and I don't know what direction he wants to go in, but I like that he's looking at cornerback coaches, because that tells me maybe he's looking at guys who can teach his cornerbacks how to play more press man.
Yeah.
I think that's where they're going, but I could be off about that.
No, I like where you're going, Rod, and that's what I was going to get your take on. I feel like right now, with Manny Muhammad entering a draft eligible year, and you've recruited guys like Kobe Black, you bring in a Cade Phillips, even a Wardell Mack, who, CJ, we know Wardell Mack played all over the place in high school. Thank you for that.
Great job, man.
I'll use that when I check into hotels and rent cars from now on. But Wardell Mack learning that corner position. If I'm Sark, I may just value a teacher of technique at the corner position more than somebody that can give me a schematic advantage, because I don't know. Rod, we talked about this on Football Theory too. I don't know what more of a schematic advantage. You can only build on what Johnny Nansen brought to the table, playing more middle field close safety, and as much one high as Arizona played, he brought that to Texas. PK's adopted that. So Johnny Nansen's been responsible for more schematic evolution than I think anybody you could probably hire. I think Sark's just looking for teachers, guys who can teach technique, and you need to get the most out of a Cade Phillips. You want Manny Muhammad to have a bounce back year, and Kobe Black's going to be needing to play more reps. So I think it's a teacher above all else.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah. It makes sense, and we talked about this too, kind of with Sark, because Sark he's got so many great recruiters, and he's a great recruiter, and NIL is a great recruiter, and Texas got plenty of that. You want someone that can recruit, no doubt, but you got a lot of support for guys to help them recruit now. I got some rainmakers on my staff that can help you. Sark can close. NIL can help you close. We can switch up the guys we put out there on the road. So I think that's why Sark, maybe looking like Jeff says to a teacher above all else. If you're just not an ace recruiter, we got you. We can handle that. Yeah.
That's what I got. CJ, how I know he helped a lot with the Justice Terry recruitment, but it seems like Chris Gilbert's been one of those X factors getting out on the road.
Oh, absolutely. Especially up in Dallas, right? That was kind of his safe haven before Texas. While at Texas's first stint, went back up to North Texas. Now he's back down again. Look, I don't know if Texas has a Colin Simmons or an Anthony Hill without a Chris Gilbert and what he brought to the table. And that could be applied to a number of other guys that Texas has pursued, right? Manny Muhammad from South Oak Cliff, Chris Gilbert, South Oak Cliff guy. So there's a lot of connections there. You put him on the road and you let him just go venture throughout the Dallas area. He's going to do a lot of good for your football program. Mm-hmm. And that was the other thing I was going to mention is you start looking at cornerback for the 2025 class that Texas just signed. You start looking ahead to some 2026s. Jeff, they're going after guys that they want to play that man coverage with. There are two right now that you could point to and say, oh, if these are your cornerbacks in a given class, I don't know how opposing offenses are going to create separation. That's Jalen Lott and that's Jermaine Bishop. If you put 20 pounds, 25 pounds on Jermaine Bishop, get him up to 185, 190, you're going to have a sticky son of a gun out there at cornerback. And we've already talked about Jalen Lott and what he can do with his athleticism. But that's essentially what it is. You recruit the athletes, you teach them how to play cornerback, or they come from a high school program that's teach and press man. Not many do that these days, right?
Yeah.
But the point is that level of athlete that Texas is pursuing out wide at corner, it's going to continue to increase and increase as they continue to show that they're in this caliber of national title contending teams.
Yep, I like that. Super chat here from 817 Mr. Talk Too Much. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. It says, why not have a skills competition in place of the spring game? Much like the Pro Bowl has kind of gone to, right? Pro Bowl is like, we'll do skills competition, things like that. What do you guys thought? Skills competition in place of the spring game, would that work?
Honestly, what I would like to see instead, you can do skills competition. What about alumni flag football game?
Oh, I'm in. Robbie's in. I'm in.
You better start stretching.
I'm in. Let's go.
Hey,
let's go.
Vincent Paul Young Jr. quarterback in one team, Colt McCoy quarterback in the other team. I'm all about it.
I'm all about it, man. Do we need age ranges on this? Because I don't know. I want no 50-year-old corner out there, but that's what I am basically. I think I still got it until I go up against a guy who just left the league. So I don't know.
Rod doesn't need to be covering Colin Johnson one-on-one.
Y'all see that cushion I give him? Let me give him a nice cushion. Yeah, Colin's gonna be doing that too. Oh, right. Let's go.
Rod's a dad now. Rod doesn't need to put himself in harm's way like that. He got a baby to think about.
Honestly, Jeff, I love that idea. And honestly, I would double down. I'd say if we're gonna do it, and then one of your rivals also cancels their spring game, let's do an intra-squad one. Let's do a alumni flag football game against the Aggies. Boom.
Love it.
Oh, dude, it'll be tackling out there. That'll get dirty. And you can have the fans and the players on each side just kind of rooting on. That's money right there. See, you make some money off of that one, dog. You make some money.
If you have an alumni game, you're gonna have a lot of guys that were in school, were active players when the rivalry was active. And we was talking about it, Rod. For a long time, there was a level of decorum with Texas and Texas A&M. I felt like it was more about, to me, showcasing high school football than the state of Texas and football in the state of Texas. The one game you could not have a Texas OU alumni flag football game. That would end in somebody probably facing a felony charge at the end of the day.
Yep. I agree with you on that. Yeah. Because the Aggies, like I said, you grew up with Aggies.
Yeah.
I played with Aggies. Like literally at Houston Lamar, I had Teron Woolridge went to the A&M, Keith Joseph with A&M. Like they were the best players, some of the best players on my team. They went to A&M. And Aggies had a lot of great schools across the state of Texas. And then now in all the, they play a lot of 7-on-7. They go to all these camps. So they know all these guys. That's more of a sibling rivalry. I've always said that. The OU, and you're right, that's hatred. That is good old fashioned hatred. So yeah, you don't want to do that. But anyway, it's just a little idea. I like that idea, Jeff. Catch the Wave, another super chat here. Thank you, Catch the Wave. He says, can you guys share 3 things that Sark is amazing at and 3 things to improve on? Oh, this is good. Okay, amazing at. He's great at scripting. Oh man, his preparation to come up with, and I think they say it's a 40-play script. Sark's opening script, and I know there have been times when it's not, like first Georgia game, is unbelievable. Like I said, it is especially the big games. The big game is more creative and innovative in the big games. Where he struggles is when he's got to go off script, right? He's like the rapper that can go hard if he writes his lyrics, but if he's got to go freestyle, he's like, I don't know what the hell's going on. He sounds terrible, right? That's Sark in a nutshell, because Sark, he doesn't do well as well in making adjustments, winning that chess match within the game. So that's one thing he's got to improve on. Also, I want him to break tendency more in big games. I've talked to you about this, Jeff. He should break tendency more in big games. He does not, and he needs to be more of an extremist. Or he needs to be bullish on certain concepts when they work really well, right? When you're killing Washington with the empty formation, why the hell don't you run it more when you did it 2 years in a row? If you're averaging 10 yards per play on pony package, run it down the damn throat in the pony package, man. If targets to motion is working, why are you only doing it 6 or 7 times? Do it 15 times. You know what I mean? Like I would do it until they stop it, and oftentimes Sark doesn't do that. So that's a couple of things I'll throw out there.
In terms of something that he does that he's amazing at, I think it's his feel for roster building in the current day and age of college football. I don't know if that's where you were going, CJ, but when you look at how through recruiting and through the portal, they're not cutting corners, and it was positions like offensive line and quarterback. They're going to get homegrown guys at those important positions, and where they have to fill in gaps at the portal, it's not like other than, interior defensive line this year, where you've got to have a gap between the guys that left and, guys like Myron Charles and Josiah Sharma and even Alex January. You needed Travis Shaw and Hero Canoe and Cobra Var to fill that gap. Other than that, they have done a remarkable job, this regime has, of making sure that the pipeline is flowing, the talent acquisition pipeline is flowing, and that depth has not been an issue the last few years. So I think Sark roster building and roster management, I think he's one of the absolute best in the game right now.
That's a good one.
Yeah, I'll add to that just the ability to, and he's certainly learned from this from the first 2 years, is when going out to get kids out of the portal, do they fit your culture? Do they fit the vision of coming in and winning immediately, even if they have to sacrifice some snaps or some targets, whatever it might be? I just look at a handful of guys that they brought in this past year, right? Jermaine Lole, Bill Norton, Andrew Makuba, Trey Moore, Matthew Golden. That bunch bought in immediately, did the dirty work, increased their draft stock tremendously as a result, and all played into what the ultimate goal of this Texas team was. And they made it back to the college football semifinal. You could argue they don't do that without 1, 2, or 3 of those guys. So I think that's one thing that he's certainly really good at. One thing I'm interested in to see how he kind of continues to develop early on in his tenure here at Texas is early commitments at Texas. Sometimes you get a Lance Jackson that likes to commit in January and he's just all the way firm all the way through. But other times, and we saw it last year, Brandon Brown, I know that was different with a position coach leaving, but Anthony Williams, right? You get some guys early in the fold. You say yes, maybe a little too early. And we're getting to the point now where Sarkeesian, because of the success on the field, because of the coaching staff that has proven to develop these guys, because of NIL, they'll be able to kind of play the long game at times with a number of kids, come in, pick whoever they want out of a pick of the country's top. You don't have to say yes early. You don't have to deal with what could be negative recruitment with decommitments. I think that's something that we'll continue to see. Obviously, he hasn't done it a whole lot this year, only 3 commits as we enter the second week of February. But I think that's something that we'll continue to monitor with Sark early on in his tenure, I guess, or as it grows into year 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah. CJ, I'll back up one thing you said right there on the portal acquisitions real quick. Sorry, Rob, but the portal acquisitions, the guys that haven't fit the culture, whether it's an Ajay Hall or Jaleel Billingsley, Kendrick Blackshire, the guys that aren't here very long, your culture's been so good that those guys haven't brought the culture down with them.
That's a good point.
Your portal misses haven't killed you. Your hits have been great, but there hasn't been a portal guy that's like, yeah, that guy really just went scorched earth while he was here and, did irreparable damage to the program. That hasn't happened.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. And no, I think a lot of those guys have been Bama guys, right? He was just like, hey, man, they're Bama guys. They're on the route. So I think he just kind of assumed that that they would be compatible.
Yeah.
Because so much of his culture is kind of from, what Nick Saban did there at Alabama. But that doesn't always work out that way. But no, Sark quarterback recruiting. We ain't talked about that. I mean, there may be who's a better quarterback recruiter, Lincoln Riley, maybe. That's it. I don't even know if that's the case anymore. But
even
there ain't many guys out there recruiting quarterbacks better than Sark.
You got that Arch Manning feather in your cap. You get
yeah,
for a while.
Yeah. How about this one from Jose? Thank you for the super chat, Jose. Really appreciate. And thank you, Catch the Wave. That was a great question. Jose, for the super chat, we appreciate it. Says, has Sark done enough with his offense during his time? I feel like he hasn't been elite at his specialty like Kirby or Saban. We need more next year. He's had a top. I mean, it's been a top 20 offense, right? We're talking about top 20 here, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's gone from 18th to 15th to 7th this year, 35.8 this year. The one thing I would say to that is when this offense stalls, it stalls for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
You see the third quarters, you kind of sit there and you get frustrated. It stalls in the red zone. It doesn't feel like your offense has been maximized despite putting up some really solid numbers. And I think that's what builds frustration. It's not just a random 3 and out here or there, right? You'll go full quarters. And Rod, we've talked about this for about 3 months now, right? Those third quarters, they're a pain in the side for you. And that's frustrating, especially when you are on the road at Arkansas, or on the road in College Station, and you're on the brink of putting teams completely to bed. Oh, shoot. Arizona State, right? These games ultimately decide whether or not your season continues or not. And it's the same issue over and over again. Yet when you look at the big picture at the end of the season, you sit there and say, oh, wow, that was a top 10 scoring offense. I understand that it maybe didn't feel like it, but you put good offenses together. You scored a lot of points. You put a lot of guys in the league. How do you elevate that? And I think we're close to a point, and this is kind of what I was talking about with Ohio State, is do you accumulate too much talent to fail? And I think Texas is getting pretty close to that doorstep, and I'm really excited to see if that's the case with Arch Manning or not.
Good point.
I feel like some of that is the one thing I can say about Quinn and the negative, and I've been a big Quinn Ewers supporter. I didn't feel like at times Quinn did enough to elevate everybody around him. If Arch does that, I think that'll take care of a lot of the consistency issues, because I think Arch Manning is a guy that can elevate the play of everybody around him. It does feel, Jose, like they've left some meat on the bone a little bit. But I would say we're splitting hairs, because piggybacking off what CJ just said, it's not empty calorie numbers. Like, they're producing against quality opponents. It's just now you're at the point where, hey, in the really, really big games against a Georgia and Ohio State, those high leverage games, can you not have that where you just look completely inept for a long stretch and you're asking way too much of the defense and special teams? It's the antithesis of complementary football. And I think a lot of that goes back to the development of the offensive line in the run game. Can you have a consistent run game without – it's got to be more – you can't just rely on having the first back taken in the draft to be the reason why you've got a consistent run game.
Good point.
Your offensive line and your schematics, everything's got to get taken up. To me, that's where it starts, right? I don't know. That's just the way I look at it when it's running the football.
No, and I think it's interesting because it kind of gets to Todd's question here. I know we're getting close to the end of it, so I want to try to get through a couple of these. It's a good question. Is Texas at a crossroads schematically in the running game? Too much emphasis on outside zone, more inside zone, counter, and base blocking. The O-line has somewhat underperformed given their size and talent. Good point, Todd. I've always said we have just stereotyped the offensive line because they're big humans, and we assume big humans means you're going to maul opponents, and they are not maulers. They're big. They're big humans, but they're not maulers. Now, maybe this next group will be. But the previous O-line, they were more of a finesse O-line, which is crazy. They were great in zone blocking schemes. They were great and better and great in pass protection, not all the time, but for the most part, that was their elite trait as an offensive line. And they did struggle in gap and power schemes at times to create and generate explosive plays, which is why goal line and red zone running is really tough for them, because those are just gap and power schemes, not running a ton of zone concepts once you get down there in short yardage and then on the goal line in red zone. So, Todd, you're right. This new offensive line for new starters, maybe their elite trait is they can be more of a mauling downhill blocking group on the offensive line. But that I totally agree with you. I went and looked at the last 7 games and how many explosive runs they had and what concepts they ran. Out of the I think it was 26 explosive runs I counted in the last 7 games. Guys, like over 65% of those are outside zones or split wide zones. That was their bread and butter. And when teams were able to shut that down, Texas didn't have a true counter, or at least somewhere they could pivot in the run game.
Yeah, offensive line's a unique organism, and I think it speaks to, again, I'll go back to Rod, some of your time on campus to make this point. You go back and look at some of the lines that had like Mike Williams and Leonard Davis, had some bigger guys. Those lines didn't dominate the way you would think they did. But maybe the best offensive line in school history was with the guys that just clicked together, with Studdard and Senline and Blaylock and Tony Hills and Will Allen. Might not have been as individually talented as some other lines Texas had, but as a whole, they just were so in sync with what they were doing. I mean, I've had Casey tell me there were instances where they would line up and tell the defense exactly what they were running. Like, hey, we're running inside zone, that B gap right there. And they couldn't stop it because they were just so good at their jobs. So I think that's a lot to do. Like you said, Rod, I just didn't feel like it all added up the way it needed to on the offensive line. There was just something missing that didn't allow that group to click the way it needed to click. So maybe it's going to be more inexperienced this year, but I think maybe you could benefit from that, because I think you'll need to run less zone and you need more gap power schemes to create angles and levers to help some of those guys out. And I know we keep talking about it, but the scrambling ability of Arch and the threat of a quarterback run, that's going to help out that group too, because you have to have a hat to account for the quarterback. Even if Arch is only pulling it 1 or 2 times a game, the 1 or 2 times you don't, you could give up an explosive play. You could give up a 50, 60-yard touchdown.
Yep. No, I agree with you on that. Thank you for the question, Todd. Let's thank our sponsor, South Point, before we end our live stream tonight. Our friends over at South Point Dodge. That's right, folks. You can score an easy extra point this season when you get to the point with our friends over at South Point Dodge. They have over 600 vehicles in stock right now, including a great selection of Ram 1500s, 2500s, and 3500s. Whatever your truck needs, South Point Dodge is your one-stop shop. Right now, they actually have an amazing sale happening with over 50 Ram 2500s right now, all marked down with huge savings over at South Point Dodge. So go to southpointdodge.com. You can check out their inventory there, or you can go see it in person off of I-35 in South Austin there at South Point Dodge. So go check them out, folks. Whatever your truck needs, it is your one-stop shop. Austin's automotive everything is southpointdodge.com. Thank you very much for sponsoring our Wednesday night live stream. We appreciate it very much. All right. I did say that I wanted to get to Bucky Brooks' top 5. So before we get out of here, I promised it. So I want to deliver the promise. Bucky Brooks, top 5 at every position. He's got Isaiah Bond as the number 5 wide receiver. That was a little surprising, in my opinion. Yeah, right. I mean, because I haven't seen you guys. I mean, I haven't seen Isaiah Bond really ranked that high. That was a little surprising.
I haven't seen him healthy in about 4 months.
Yeah, that's a good point, CJ. I was gonna say, Rod, that may be more indicative of the wide receiver class as a whole.
True.
Once you get past the top 2 or 3, beauty may be in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, like I said, Tatoria McMillan, Luther Burden, Emeka Ekbuka, Trey Harris, and then Isaiah Bond. Yeah, that's very interesting. Also, number 4 tight end, Gunnar Helm on this list. That's where Gunner's been in most, I think. Spot. He's usually 4 to 6 is where I've seen in most people's position rankings. Kelvin Banks, he's got the number 2 tackle. No surprise there. Will Campbell, LSU's number 1 tackle. And he's got Janae Barron actually a little lower than most. He's got Janae as the number 5 cornerback. in his rankings. The cornerbacks ahead of him on this list. He's got Travis Hunter, makes sense. Will Johnson from Michigan, Siobhan Revelle, East Carolina. A lot of folks like him too. Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. Then Jadae Barron. So there you go. Top 5 every position. That is for Bucky Brooks at NFL Network. All right. Thank you very much for all the questions, guys. Really, really appreciate it. Sorry I couldn't get to all of the questions. If you have some questions that we didn't get to, please direct them to the folks at Coffee and Football tomorrow, starting at 8 a.m. Also, you'll have myself, CJ, and Coach Shipley. Hell, Jeff might even drop by too. That'll be for the winning drive, starting at 3:15 tomorrow. You can direct your questions to us, and we would like to take them and answer them as well. We'll go to about 4:30 tomorrow. Also, I want to thank Matthew behind the scenes. He's the real MVP. Couldn't do it without him. Thank you, CJ, for all of your expertise. Jeff, thanks for the knowledge. Always a pleasure. Thank you to our sponsors, Flat Creek and South Point, flatcreekestate.com, southpointdodge.com. Thank you to all you guys out there for watching and for listening. Thank you very much for the super chats as well. We appreciate it. And for Jeff and for CJ and for Matthew behind the scenes, I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Hook 'em horns.
Happy Wednesday.